Welcome, everybody. This is the Curriculum Topic Strategies Project for Miss Bouton's Education 5501 course at Austin Peay State University. We've got Miss Courtney, Mr. Otis, and myself, Miss Mary Ashton, and we're going to be talking to you today about student engagement strategies. We will start at the base of that with what engagement actually is. Then we will move into the student side of that, which is how we are going to implement that into a classroom and what engagement means to a student and to an institution. And lastly, we will follow up with examples of strategies that are backed up by research that you could implement in your classroom tomorrow if you thought that it fit your classroom's environment. We will start off by, as I said, defining engagement.
All right, guys. So when we think of the term engagement, what comes to mind? Is it how well our students interact with one another, or maybe the amount of participation we see within a lesson? Engagement is a fluid concept and can be enhanced in many ways. The trick is for you as an educator to find which strategy fits best with your class structure and teaching philosophy. Early studies on engagement had an emphasis on measuring engagement by how active students were in the academic setting, but later on it was thought that it should be measured based on the instructional institution's implementation strategies, as well as how active and invested the students were. In most class settings, your classroom culture or structure will define what engagement is to you as an educator. Now that we've defined engagement, let's go over the types of engagement. Through research, it has been discovered that there are three types of engagement. The first being behavioral, which includes students observing and learning their environmental norms and acting accordingly. An example of this is during a class activity, if it's the norm to raise your hand prior to answering a question, or if the activity requires the students to answer questions quickly or in a competitive manner, it may be the norm to blurt out the answer. The second type is emotional engagement. This type refers to the students' feelings of interest. Do they enjoy the task set before them? Does this task cause them anxiety? Or was the task too easy for them, which resulted in boredom? The third type of engagement is cognitive engagement. This type of engagement refers to factors of motivation and the desire to engage and how well they adapt to the varieties of learning. Now that we've gone over some of the basics of engagement, next we'll go over what exactly is student engagement.
So student engagement is defined as the interaction between the time, the effort, and of course, other relevant resources invested not only by the student, but also their institution, that being their school, their admin, their paraprofessionals, and their teachers. It's intended to optimize the student's experience, not hinder it. So if you are choosing strategies that have a negative result on your students' performance, then that is not the intent, and we would definitely need to try something different. We're supposed to be enhancing the learning outcomes and development of the students while also enhancing the performance and reputation of the institution, because the smarter that our students are, the more that they learn and the better they are at being able to perform, the better that our institutions, our schools look. Now we can look into some facets of student engagement that might be implemented throughout multiple different examples. The first one, we've got the affective facet. That's what the student is going to feel. If your student is interested and engaged, that means that it is definitely effective and that student engagement strategy is working. We've got behavioral, which is what the student does. If you've got students who are skipping lectures out of pocket, or even they're in the lecture, but they're being disruptive or they are just being defiant, then that would be oppositional or non-engaged. And we would definitely want to change up that engagement strategy. Then we have cognitive, as Ms. Courtney said, that's what our students are thinking. If our students are meeting or exceeding our assignment requirements, that means that their brains are turned on to the lesson and your engagement strategy is working. We've got critical facets, which is how the student thinks or is oriented. Right? If they hold their own views in dynamic tension with the received views, right? Saying that they understand, but they want to learn more about it. Or maybe they've even got an argument for another side. That means that they are engaged. Just because the students don't think and believe the way you do does not mean that they are not engaged. We've got political, or how the student acts, their sense of agency. If they assume agency toward the construction of their own knowledge, wanting to be involved, wanting to get going, then that is very engaging, and that is a big positive. Rather, if they are just a passive consumer of knowledge, whenever they're just sitting there, they're the ones who listen, they are seen but not heard, maybe that is not as engaged as we could be. And lastly, we've got the sociocultural facet, which is how our students feel, what they value. If they have got values and morals, and they will observe the protocols of referencing and citations, making sure that we are citing our sources and picking relevant sources, then that would mean that they are engaged because they want to do the right thing. Rather, if a student is plagiarizing, that would be the cheating method, right? And that would not be the definition of an engaged student. So maybe that engagement strategy would not be one that we would want to continue on with. Now we're going to move into different ways that we can engage in engagement.
All right, guys. So the first way we're going to go over is how to measure it. One of the most important things you need to remember is that your evidence needs to be reliable. Reflection and observations are a great way to collect your data and track the changes in engagement and discover what methods best suit your individual classrooms. What one class is responsive to may not be the case for the next class. One study has shown that implementation of the Minnesota Student Engagement Instrument, also known for the acronym SEI, was believed to help schools accurately measure engagement should they have the resource of having a psychologist that can administer the assessment. If we have the ability to measure engagement accurately, the proper interventions can be implemented to address student needs. Examples of interventions can be desk placement. So like, do your students thrive in a more individualized work setting? Or maybe having the desk group together to signal that group work and conversation is promoted. Another strategy is how you develop policy and protocols, procedures for your classroom. Are the students involved in the planning, or is it teacher-led? These are just a few examples of how to use your data that you have collected. So our next way to engage engagement is to focus on relationship building. First, you must think about what type of relationship you wish to have with your students. If the student sees your enthusiasm for the content you are teaching, it is a natural reaction for students to feed off that same energy and model the behavior they are observing. Let your students in on what type of person you are. Clear and concise expectations can allow students to develop assumptions on what kind of teacher you are or you aspire to be. Are you a go with the flow type of instructor, or are you a everything needs to be this way and how I say it type of person? You must be careful not to cross too many lines as well, meaning it's okay to have an open conversations with your students, but always be mindful if it's information that is, one, acceptable to be discussing with the student, and two, that it's nothing too personal that could be deemed inappropriate to have those types of conversations with your students. Your relationship with your students can significantly impact their engagement as well as the overall class climate. So before I begin with this slide, I want you guys to take a second and reflect back on classes you've had in the past. Specifically, I want you to think about how a teacher you may have had motivated you to complete a task, or maybe even motivated you to do well on whatever task they have set before you. One thing you may realize now as we dive into the information about engagement is that the teacher you are thinking about may have provided you with more freedom to explore, but yet had the proper balance of structure to guide you through your task or assignments. Finding that balance is pivotal to engage your students and giving them the skills to adopt a motivation to learn and engage in your teaching content. The use of technology can further your student engagement as well when used properly. As a teacher, we must be mindful of the possibilities of off-task behaviors that can naturally come along when introducing a new technology to your class. So in most classrooms, students will be subjected to a multitude of questions, some of which can be in a Q&A format. As you begin to engage your students, it is important to remember that effective questioning is heavily influenced by what you ask as the educator. On this slide, it lists a couple of examples of what types of questions that can enhance engagement. Your goal as the educator is to encourage students to engage in their cognitive processes by expanding on their thoughts and ideas and providing follow-up questions to guide them when there may be a miscue or a poor association has been made. When questioning students, you don't want them to feel that they are being interrogated, nor cause them to have a fear of being wrong. A simple modification that can assist in engagement is to replace the question from what with what if. Doing so can change the tone and in turn provide the opportunity for deep thought and productive conversation. The final way to engage in engagement is to connect your lessons or tasks to the real world. This step can be tricky for some because think of the diversity you will have in your classroom. You as an educator may even feel overwhelmed by the thought of trying to appeal to each and every student. One strategy that has been applied is to create some sort of community project that the class as a whole has decided on. This would require extensive planning and brainstorming, but a study has shown that students who can connect learning with real life events were shown to have better engagement and a boost in motivation.
So now we're moving along to examples of student engagement strategies. All right, praise and rewards both motivates and demotivates your students, depending on how they are used. When and how students have been praised may be one reason they differ in their confidence and motivation levels. So reward is something that is given to the student for probably good behavior or completion of work, their attendance. So that can be candy or an extra day in the gym for me, per se. And then praise is something that's verbal. It's just like, hey, good job. Keep up the good work. So those are examples of rewards and praise. All right, for the goal setting, all right, knowing what to praise your students for and when to give that praise is just as important as the praise itself. You need to set a goal and decide on who's coming up with that goal. Is it you as a teacher, the student? Also, how do you know that goal is been achieved? How did that student know they hit that goal? So the following guidelines can help you deliver praise and rewards correctly and at the right time. So being specific, so that's descriptive and precise praise. Takes the guesswork out of what you're praising. Students should be able to identify exactly what they did well and know the positive behavior you want them to repeat. Also, you need to be clear about the expectations. For praise to be effective, students need to know the standards. Explain the criteria you use to evaluate the assignment or the expected behavior, then provide positive feedback to that student so they can directly match your expectations. You have to be sincere, don't overpraise. Students know when you're not being sincere. In fact, not being sincere may damage your credibility and your relationship with that student. It can make students wonder if you can recognize their strength. Overpraising can be harmful to the students who are struggling because it sends a message that teachers have low expectations for them. That's why the teacher is giving them that reward or praise in the first place. All right, you have to praise the process and progression and not the outcomes. Students who learn and think differently struggle to complete an assignment or task. In fact, it may take several attempts for that student to finish. Students feel discouraged when they're working hard, but feel like their work still isn't good enough for that teacher. All right. You can support students by giving behavior-specific praise about their progress as they work, letting them know, hey, you're right on track. Keep doing what you're doing and just keep progression. All All right, here goes some examples of what you can give your rewards for. So if they're always in your class, they got good attendance, good behavior, they're completing your work assignments, they're progressing, like with the assignments. Hey, maybe at the beginning they wasn't right where they're supposed to, your expectations, but you see the progress, the hard work that they're putting into it. And my favorite, sportsmanship. For us, it's in the gym. We like to get competitive. So, hey, if they're encouraging their teammates, even the other team, giving pointers, I like to give rewards for that. Here goes some positive. So when you're handing out rewards and praise, now you done motivated that student. Like, hey, I can do this work. I can get better in your class. Also, they go back home and tell their parents, hey, this teacher recognized my hard work. And now you're getting that parent-teacher relationship. Now they're encouraging their student to do better. It also increases that student's desire to learn in your class. Now they want to know what you know. And it shows that, hey, this teacher actually cares about me, and it just builds a nice relationship. All right, so negatives. If you hand out too much rewards and praise, now the value of that reward diminish, like it doesn't have value anymore. Also, the student will stop caring about the learning part and then just want that reward or praise. So, and then it can demotivate students if you're not recognizing their hard work.
All right, moving into some other examples of student engagement strategies we can work on. Everybody has got to have some sort of a classroom management strategy, and your classroom management strategy is also a student engagement strategy. The definition of classroom management is the process by which a teacher creates a safe and positive classroom culture where students sense a genuinely positively emotional climate, therefore motivating students to succeed and to learn. So if where they are is positive and where they are is happy and where they are is structured, then they will succeed. To put this into action, we need to make for sure we are setting clear, concise expectations and that we are holding our classes to them. One of the strategies we've implemented at my school this year, school-wide, is responding to students not meeting expectations with stop. That is not how we do things here. Or the expectation at this time, at this moment is not being met. And it's incredible. At first, they get irritated with it, as middle schoolers would. But then they start to realize that, wow, they are going to get on top of us and make sure we are meeting this. And eventually it becomes second nature to them. We also want to make sure that we are connecting to them on a social, emotional level as well. We need to connect with them socially and emotionally while also building positive relationships. Touching back on what Courtney talked about earlier, where you've got to find that balance. You don't want to become too social and too personal with them. We've still got to maintain that professionalism between a student and an educator. But giving just a little bit can really help our classroom management, because then they won't come in and just expect to be bossed all day long. Lastly, we've got the use of real-world connections to keep them engaged rather than disengaged, often leading to off-task shenanigans, right? If we bring in pieces of their lives that they can relate to, their brains are more likely to be turned on to what you are talking about, rather than if you are only referencing some text that they do not care about, or even only referencing your life that they don't really have a connection with. If we can connect it back to what they know and what their everyday experiences are, then they are much more likely to tune in and turn on to your lesson. Another very effective engagement strategy is to have flexible seating. Right now, listen, nice, clean rows definitely have their place, right? Every once in a while, you've got to have the straight road classroom, and that's fine. But sometimes we need to give literally a little bit of wiggle room. So take a second to imagine what your middle school classroom looked like. I don't know about you guys, and I don't want to date myself too much, but strict straight rows were pretty much the normal up until maybe I got into high school or even college. Did you ever want to wiggle or get distracted by the place that you had to sit and learn? That is not effective, right? Our flexible seating can help engage our students. Maybe a couch, somewhere comfortable to sit, a pillow, a swivel chair, even a lawn chair, for goodness sake, could have helped you tune in to the lesson a little bit more, because you wouldn't be distracted about the physical desk you were having to sit in. Instead, you could be engaged in the teacher's lessons because you were comfortable, or because you had something to kind of fidget with but not make a big scene about. My personal experience, I have a couch in the back of my classroom and 2 stand-up desks. While that might not seem like much, right? I know teachers who have full classrooms full of kitchen tables, or full classrooms full of beach bags and sofas and recliners. I could not make that happen, but a couch and 2 stand-up desks was within my means. And it makes a huge difference. I try really hard whenever the straight desk rows are needed to let students have a goal that they can reach to, like, okay, if we can get this far in the lesson, you're more than welcome to move back to the couch. But something as simple as a couch or a pillow in the middle of their day, they are human beings too, and they are going through things in their life where maybe they want a sense of comfort that something so simple as flexible seating can bring them. Offering kids comfy, flexible seating options means that they have some control in where they sit and how they learn. And just giving them that little bit of control can really help them engage more in the lesson. And lastly, I would love to bring up the engagement strategy of brain breaks. What the definition of it is physical activity breaks, or brain breaks, where there are short little breaks in instruction during which students participate in some sort of structured physical activity. Now, while Otis and Courtney don't have as big of a problem with this because they are in the gym or they have that opportunity to get up and move more frequently, as an ELA teacher, let me tell you, sometimes the lessons are snooze fests, and we need to give our students an opportunity to stand up and get active. Most students are not getting that recommended hour of physical activity daily. So this is just going to help get their blood flowing. It's going to help get their minds working because that blood is flowing. And it's just going to wake their bodies and their brains back up so that they can engage back in that lesson. Now, of course, this can go too far and it can be distracting. So you have to find that balance with your kids of what is too far and what is just enough. This is not only a strategy that can be implemented into elementary or secondary education. In one study, these brain breaks were actually implemented into a college classroom. And out of the 53 students polled on what they thought about the brain breaks, over half of them said that it was very effective and it really helped them engage in their teachers' lessons and kept them awake and involved in the lesson more often. So this brings us to the conclusion of our presentation. There are tons of options out there that you can implement into your classroom. Some may work and some may not, and that is okay. The needs of your students are as individual as they are. So our engagement strategies have to be as individual as they are too. Try a few and don't be discouraged if they don't work, or if they come with some growing pains, right? Change is hard for everybody, especially elementary, middle, and high school students whose lives are enveloped in so much change as it is. Just be patient and grow these emotions. Get to know what your kids need and then balance that with what they want, right? We've got to meet those educational needs and requirements, but also there is some give to this in our classrooms. We can also cater to what they want a little bit with some of these student engagement strategies.
Okay, guys, so we have attached a YouTube video for you guys to watch.